Elizabeth Gilbert joins me here in Studio Q. Hello.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Hi.
Okay, so after you wrote Eat, Pray, Love, you sat down to write a novel set in the Amazon. But something didn't exactly go right.
Yes.
What happened?
Yeah, so I had this idea to write this book based on a story that my husband, who's from Brazil, had told me about this huge project back in the 60s that had happened in the Amazon jungle that had been a big catastrophe. And, I did what you do when you get serious about a project. I was giving it my time and attention and research. And then I got sidetracked for personal reasons. Long story short, my husband got basically deported, and I had to spend a year in the immigration system of the U.S. government trying to get him back. And then I ended up writing a book about that instead, which became my memoir, Committed. And when I came back to that novel a couple years later, it was gone.
Describe that. I mean,
Yeah.
You're dancing in the world of ideas here.
Yeah.
You have this idea. You feel this spark of inspiration.
Yeah.
Life circumstances takes you away from that, very understandably.
Yeah.
Then you come back to it. You've done all this hard work. And what's that like when it's not there?
Well, here we have to get into magical thinking, which is a realm I am super comfortable in, and I know not everybody is, but I'm just going to go there because I spend most of my life there. I happen to have this magical thinking, mystical idea about how inspiration and creativity work, which is this sort of pre-Enlightenment way of thinking about it, pre-rational thought, and it's this sense that ideas are this conscious life form without a body that circulates the world like a virus, like a germ, looking for human collaborators. And ideas spend eternity just going from person to person, tapping on people's shoulders, like, "Are you my mother? Are you my mother? Are you my mother?" And mostly we don't pay attention because we're not tuned into it. But when we do pay attention and then enter into the contract with the idea, now you've stepped into a dance with a very mysterious otherworldly force. And it's half of it is, or maybe 90% of it is your work, but some of it comes from somewhere else too, and you're sort of brushing up against this dichotomy between the pragmatic and the mystical, and every idea has a kind of pulse to it, a sort of life in it. And I know the difference between an idea that's living, that has a pulse, and an idea that's dead. And when I came back to this novel, all I can tell you is it had no pulse. It was an empty snakeskin. The thing that was in there that was sentient and alive was gone.
I'm tracking with you in this magical thinking stuff, just so you know.
Cool, thanks.
But I also know that you just don't give up on ideas that easily.
Right.
So what was that process like? I mean,
yeah.
were you trying to kind of revive it?
And this is the crazy, weird balance that only the artist themselves can kind of try to figure out. When do you lean in and push harder into it? And when do you surrender and say, look, I'm just throwing good hours after bad here. I'm no longer making any process. There are other things that want to be made. It's time to move on. I don't know how to tell someone else how to find that point, but I found my point with that book where I just thought, I'm beating a dead horse. There's nothing, I can't revive this thing. And maybe it's best to just leave it, and maybe it'll come back to me, maybe it won't. But in the meantime, don't suffer, don't anguish, just move on to the next thing. And
what was that moment like where you officially gave up, where you said to your publisher, listen, this isn't going to happen? What was that moment like for you?
It's always fun to call your publisher and tell them. And then to try to explain about fairies and genies and viral ideas not, coming into form. There's this great trust that I just had to ask them to have in me. And I'd given them another book in the meantime.
Yeah.
I'd given them this memoir, which is kind of more what they wanted from me anyway. And they know that I always work, So I guess I just said, trust me as much as I trust inspiration. It's not going to be this thing. Let's just hope it's something else. Let's not panic. Let's not add drama to it. I mean, my big feeling about the creative process is the more you can dial down the drama, which is hard for creative people because we're sensitive and we're emotional, right? But the more you can just kind of keep the drama in check, the more likely it is that the next idea will find you open and receptive.
A key piece of that you just named is trusting yourself and your own work.
Yeah.
Was that hard for you, or were you like, no, I know I'll get back to work? I think for a lot of people, giving up that idea sort of is a challenge to their own sense of their own work ethic and ability to sort of persevere.
Yeah. Look, you cry. You know what I mean? But you don't want to cry for a year. It's okay. There's a sort of voice within me that I've always had that's been like, okay, we're going to be a little heartbroken about this for a while. We're going to write a real sad poem in our journal about it. We're going to have some tears because it hurts but your soul wants to keep doing stuff,
Yeah.
And so your ego's taken a blow. But your soul, when you check in with your soul and you're like, how's it going? Your soul's like, I'm good. Can we keep, what's next? What's next? I just want to engage. I just want to communicate. I just want to make stuff. And so I felt like the less pressure and anxiety I could put on myself about that, the better. Yeah.
So what happened next? What was it like to be sitting back at your desk again to write?
I actually didn't go back to my desk for a while. I took a break and went and I started a new creative thing. Sometimes I found that when the work isn't working in terms of writing, that you can cross-pollinate your creativity by taking up another pursuit that's creative that has lower stakes, right? Because writing has huge stakes for me. It's how I identify myself in a really big way. So I, like once in my life, I remember being very blocked and I started taking art classes. Not an artist, not a visual artist. The work wasn't good, but
You had to get back to play, lower the stakes.
You know, Einstein he called it combinatory play, the idea that when he was blocked with mathematics, he would pick up the violin, and it opened up some other channel in him where he could almost like relax and forget about the anxiety, and then the solution would come, right? So I started gardening, and I thought, I'm just going to make a really beautiful garden. I'm going to play around in the soil with flowers and do that for a summer and just be cool. Just not lose my mind.
Yeah.
And kind of in a weird way, literally get grounded, you know, like get my hands in the dirt because it's so tactile and satisfying. Writing can be so ephemeral, and gardening, like you put a seed in, you water it, it grows. It's a little bit easier. So I just devoted myself to that for a while.
I think the common denominator with all those methods is it gets you not thinking about yourself.
Right.
I feel like that's the common denominator.
Well, you got to get out of you have to get out of that play that you're always in where you are the dramatic lead. And look, we're all in that play all the time. And sometimes as a creative person, really interesting stuff happens on that theater of the self. And sometimes really bad stuff happens. And I also, you know, I have a theory, I talk about it in Big Magic, where I say that if you have a creative mind, which is to say human mind, it's essentially like owning a border collie for a pet. Like, you better give that dog a job to do or it's going to find a job to do, and you're not going to like the job that it finds. So you have to keep that thing occupied. Even if it's not the art that you love or identify with, find a thing to do so that it can like chase a stick all day. Because my experience is if I'm not actively creating something in my life, the odds are very clearly that I'm probably destroying something, and it's going to be my own peace of mind, a relationship, you know. So I feel like just keep that dog running, even if it's not in the direction that you intended.
Do you remember stumbling upon that particular insight that your mind is a border collie, so to speak?
It's not so much that I stumbled upon it; it's that you come home enough days and the border collie ate your couch, and you're sort of like, I need a thing to do. Like, I better give myself a thing to do. And my dear friend, Brene Brown, who's an incredible researcher about shame and vulnerability, you know of her, she said something really great to me the other day in a conversation about this. She said, and I'd never heard it put so clearly, but she said, unused creativity is not benign. You know, your creativity is an enormous, powerful, muscular engine within you. And if you're not using it in some way in your life, it's not like it just sits there in neutral doing nothing. You know, it churns, but it churns against you. And that's how you kind of get, you know, the depression gets big, the anxiety gets big, the tension gets big, and your life gets small. And you're in this tiny little box of depression and anxiety and tension. And so really, I feel like it's almost a public service, a community service for me to do creative work, because otherwise that engine will do very bad things. And so if I want my world around me to be functioning, then I have to be making something.
You talk about all the hard things that a writer faces, someone who's trying to be creative faces. What's the hardest for you?
Wow. For me, honestly, it's creating the right time and space in which to work, because that requires setting boundaries, and I'm not very good at that, because I'm a person who wants everybody to be happy, and I'm a giver, and I'm also very social, which is a weird thing for a writer, because normally people become writers because they don't want to engage with humanity. But I always say I have the soul of a very serious writer, but I have the personality of an airline stewardess. Like, I'm essentially really interested in, and I want to be in communication with people. And when the time comes to do the work, the real work, the putting your shoulder up against the wheel, you have to be the bodyguard of your own hours, and no one will do that for you. And you have to be the one just turning down invitations or not showing up for certain things that you might otherwise really want to be part of, you know, just holding that time sacred. And the amount of entitlement, to use a word that we all hate, that you have to stand in order to be able to routinely do that
Yeah.
is huge. And it can be hard to access for people who don't want to go around the world looking like they're entitled. And yet, no art ever got made without somebody standing in their own entitlement. It's what the poet David White calls the arrogance of belonging, which is this kind of arrogance that says, I'm part of this.
Yeah.
I'm a constituent of creation. I want to not just be a bystander and a witness. I'm not just here to be born, pay bills, and die. I'm here to put my fingerprint on the world in some way, and I'm going to have to demand some time and space to do that. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but it's a constant battle.
That's part of the courage and the sort of, if arrogance is too strong a word for people, dignity, I think, would fit.
Yeah, dignity will work. And also so will, to put it on a sort of mystical level, reverence. This idea that we are a weird species. We're the making ape. Human beings have been making art for at least 40,000 years. So it's a weird story. The story of human beings and creativity is like, we're this animal that decides that we're going to take the most precious resource we have, which is our short, mortal, limited human life and our hours and our time alive, and we're going to devote it for no reason whatsoever to making something that no one wants or needs, that doesn't serve any purpose except that it delights us or it intrigues us or maybe it makes us sane. That's a fundamentally really irrational way to spend your time. And so you better have a kind of mystical reason to be doing it, a higher reason to be doing it. And that can be the arrogance of belonging. It can be dignity, as you say. It can be a sense of reverence and respect for creativity itself.
You admit the writing is hard, but you also hate it when people romanticize the struggle.
Right.
Why?
Because it's like my Yankee pragmatism too. Like, first of all, I find complaining very boring. I'm bored. I bore myself when I complain. I'm bored by listening to other people complain. It's the least possible interesting thing you can ever do with your time. And so I just don't really want to hear it from me or from anyone. I also think that you cannot be complaining and also stand in gratitude at the same time. And I feel like a lot of what I object to when I listen to artists moaning about how hard it is to be an artist is that they're playing down the fundamental gratitude that I wish they had for the fact that they get to do this thing at all, because there are millions of people in the world who have virtually no agency over their lives at all. And if you're fortunate enough to be living in a society or in a situation where you have any creative agency over your life at all, like, just use it and don't complain about it. And I also think that complaining scares away inspiration. I mean, if we're going to go along with me on my crazy magical thinking that inspiration is animate and sentient and that it wants to engage with us, like all of us, it likes to be appreciated, right? So if you're just sitting around griping about how hard it is, I feel like it's going to take its business elsewhere to somebody who's more appreciative of its contribution. I don't want word getting around the universe that I'm hard to work with, that's not going to help me get anything done. So yeah, I do think, and artists are dramatic.
Yeah.
We're grandiose. I mean, it's a wonderful thing about us, but it's to be kept in check.
You're listening to Q. My guest is Elizabeth Gilbert. Her new book is Big Magic. It's about the agony and the ecstasy of creativity. So you're trying to kill this romanticization of the struggle.
Right.
You have some interesting stories in here about how you abandoned some of these ideas at a young age. Fear became boring for you.
It's terribly boring, and it's also terribly essential. We're all here and alive because our fear at some point in our life kept us alive. And so we should, again, be grateful to our fear. It's a good function to have. It's good to have it in the software package. If you don't have it, you're going to live it short,
We evolved that for a reason.
Yeah, we have that for a reason. All of our ancestors survived long enough to procreate because they were scared enough to get out of the way of danger. It's important to have. But it's boring in the creative realm because your creativity will constantly ask of you that you enter into realms with uncertain outcome. And your fear, by its evolutionary design and nature and necessity, hates uncertain outcome. And so very early on, I realized if I want to have creativity in my life, then I'm going to have fear in my life. And I'm not going to go to war against it. I'm not going to try to be like some extreme sports version of fearless. I don't like that sort of ethic of like punch fear in the face, show it who's the best. It doesn't work. It's bigger than you anyway. And so my experience with fear is that I just allow for it, which means I spend a lot of my life afraid because I spend a lot of my life trying to do new things that I don't know if I know how to do. And so I'm kind of walking arm in arm with fear all the time. But I think what I've seen is when people try to create a life where they don't have to encounter or deal with their fear, they usually end up murdering their creativity in the process. And we don't want that because then you kill kind of the best and most interesting thing about you.
What's the number one lesson you've learned about creativity?
That curiosity is more important than passion. And that curiosity is really the truth and the way when it comes to creativity. I think we live in a society that, in the Western modern world, we fetishize passion, and young people are constantly being told to follow their passion. People of all ages are being told when they're at a roadblock or they don't know what to do, a helpful feeling person will be like, just follow your passion. And and they say it in that voice. And that's it's a very unnecessary piece of advice. It's a very unhelpful piece of advice because, for one thing, if you already have a passion, you're doing it. That's the definition of a passion, right? Like you don't need anybody to tell you to do the thing you're probably already doing. If you don't have one, or if you've lost your passion, or if you're between passions, and somebody tells you that, it's like they're sending you to find something that's just not happening right now in you, and it can make you feel exiled and ashamed and lost. And everyone's looking for like the tower of flame in the desert, when really I think the creative journey is the trail of breadcrumbs. It's a smaller scale investigation that you spend your whole life doing, and that trail of breadcrumbs is best pursued by trusting and following your curiosity. Passion is a thing that demands that you shave your head and change your name and move to India and make the big grandiose gesture. Curiosity is so mild. All it does every day is ask you to turn your head a quarter of an inch and look at something a little closer. And you can do that your whole life. And if you continue to do that, you'll have a creative life.
What does that look for you on a daily basis? Like, how do you cultivate that curiosity just on a sort of pragmatic daily basis? What does that look like for you?
I take it very seriously that it is my obligation to not ignore it when it gives me a tweak, right? Because I think a lot of times curiosity is just a little nibble at you. And I think most of the time we just brush it off, sometimes because we're distracted by our own drama, sometimes because we're looking for something bigger. We're looking for the thing that's going to put chills up your arm and send the hair, make your hair catch on fire. And you may or may not sometimes have those experiences. I've had those electrifying moments of impulse, but most of my creativity has come because something just tapped on my shoulder really lightly. And I've just learned that it's your obligation as a creative person to look and see what that is a little bit more. Like right now, I find myself every day vaguely thinking about this concept of self-hatred and the way that it stops people from living wholehearted lives, and why we have so much self-hatred in the West, and why we've sort of acknowledged that it's normal, and how everything we want is on the other side of it. And like, part of me just thinks like, oh, it's nothing to think about. But the other part of me is writing those words down every day and thinking, maybe I want to write a book about this. Maybe I want to explore this in my own life. Maybe
Maybe this is an important idea.
Maybe there's
right now.
something there, and maybe there isn't. But you do a tremendous disservice to yourself and to your creativity if you just say, well, that's not really a thing. What if it is? Or what if it isn't? What harm did it take you to spend a week thinking about it?
Investigating it a little bit
look
more.
into it a little more. It's a scavenger hunt.
You have a faith, Elizabeth, that everyone can be creative.
Yeah,
there's a lot of bad art out there.
Don't care.
There's a lot of unoriginal art out there.
Don't care.
Why do you believe that?
Because I don't. First of all, it's such a subjective thing you just said. Because you and I could sit down right now and we could make a list of what we think are the 10 most important and magnificent works of art in the world. And odds are there's going to be stuff on your list that I either doesn't excite me, or that I actually flat out think is bad. And you would say the same of mine. So you can show me the most perfect piece of art in the world, and I can find you 10 people who hate it. There are people who think the Sistine Chapel is cartoonish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are people who think Beethoven is a hack. It doesn't matter. So I don't care. And I'm not interested in criticism. I find that to be like the most absolutely boring part of the artistic process.
You include that with complaining and fear.
Yeah, I don't care. And somebody said to me the other day, like, aren't you afraid your book is going to encourage a lot of people to make bad art? And I was like, I don't. First of all, the fact that you even say that makes you sound like a jerk, one. And two, my concern is not that the world is full of bad art, which I'm not even sure it is. My concern is that there are all kinds of people in the world who believe somehow that this, our greatest shared human inheritance, the right to participate in creation, the right to become a person who is unfolding, the right to look for the jewels that are hidden within you, the right to leave a footprint on the world, that only belongs to the elite, the trained, the professional, and the tormented. And I stand firmly as a populist. I want to see people making things, period. And if we tell ourselves that, I had this conversation recently with this woman who had a big hit book like 10 years ago and hasn't been able to write one since. And she said, not a hit book, any book. And she said, well, the world's just so full of such garbage writing. I don't want to add more garbage to the pile. And I was like, thank God I never took that on as my problem. It's not my problem that the world's full of garbage writing. My problem is I've got this border collie in my head that wants to participate and wants to make stuff. And if I don't let that thing run, it's going to be, we're all in danger.
Yeah. What do you think will happen if people don't make things?
Well, I don't know if I can make huge sweeping social, that'll be the end of civilization. Yeah. I know what happens from my own lived experience from watching my friends who don't. I know what happens to their lives, and I know about the stagnation that they feel, and I know about the frustration that they feel. And I know that if you talk to them and you ask them, what was your favorite thing to do when you were 10 years old, they're not doing it anymore. What was your favorite thing to do when you were 12? What was your favorite thing to do before someone told you weren't very good at it? One of my favorite stories in this book is about a friend of mine who started figure skating again when she was in her 40s. And she'd been a really good figure skater as a teenager, but then, we live in a really competitive society, and somebody let her know, one of the coaches let her know that she didn't have what it took to be a champion. And great, she never did it for 20 years. She stopped that day doing the thing that was the greatest thing that brought her the most joy and the most sense of becoming in the world. Because we have this idea, if you're not going to be the best, what other possible motive would you have to do a thing other than to win at it, And she had a kind of boring 25 years in the interim, got a job, bought a house, was a good, productive consumer, but was a little dead, and then allowed herself in middle age to go back to it. And the story doesn't end with her winning any gold medals. It just ends with her taking entitlement over the fact that she is also allowed to be a participant in this world and not just a witness.
And her example shows that you define creativity a bit more broadly than some people would, right? A creative life. It's not necessarily always making things. It could be
any life that is guided more strongly by curiosity than by fear, period. Because that will give you a creative life if you routinely, habitually, not just once, twice, or 3 times, but routinely and habitually you make a practice out of it, you make a religion out of it, making sure that you're always following your curiosity above your fear.
You've joked in some interviews about writing a self-help book and how that's not helpful for you.
Yeah.
Why did you feel called to write this book and get this message out?
Oh, you know what it is? It's that this book's been chasing me around for 12 years. I've been thinking about writing this book, and I've been trying to figure out how to say this stuff. I've been trying to figure out, do I really want to enter into this conversation? I don't want to make it an argument. I'm not an argumentative person. I'm not interested in the neurobiology or the cultural history of creativity. There are a million books about that. And I think what it was, honestly, is that I've gotten only recently did I finally get on social media. I had kind of a stupid snobbery about it. I thought it was going to be a big time suck, and I thought it was going to be annoying. And I finally got a Facebook page 3 years ago, and it's turned into the most generative, beautiful community of people who show up on that page every day. And mostly what they are talking about day after day is, there's something else I want to be doing and I'm not doing it. What's it going to take for me to do this? I'm afraid. Do I have to quit my job to do this? Do I have to get divorced to do this? What if I'm probably not very good at it? These are the conversations that they're having. And I can feel this great longing, especially for women, for them to be given a permission slip to be allowed to explore that. And I consider this book to be just a big, giant permission slip to step into your creativity, whatever age you might be.
You talked about earlier, you mentioned how creativity is a strange human thing, where we can create these things for no practical purpose.
Right. No one gets fed by it.
No one gets fed by it.
Yeah.
So why do you think we should pursue that? Why do you think that's something to delight in rather than to sort of question?
Because it's fun, isn't it? I mean, you do it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, is there, the Greeks had this word, Eudaimonia, which I put in the book. So you know what a daemon is, right? A daemon is, some sort of a sense of a spirit, a genie, a muse. All cultures had this idea that that oftentimes humans are visited by spirits, right? Like, it's only very recently that we decided that that's not cool, but like some of us are still very comfortable with that, by the way. And the daemon, the daemons of creativity were like those strange impulses that you get, the serendipitous moments where you meet the right person who's working on the same kind of thing you're working on, where all of a sudden it's not working and then it is working, where you feel like you're channeling something that isn't, like you've been laboring over something and it's just been completely unproductive for 6 months, and then one day it's happening, right? And you feel like you're being led, guided, lifted. And they created this word called Eudaimonia, which means it's a short word for a long idea. It's almost like a German word when you translate it out, but it says the singular joy of working well with your creativity, with your creative daemon. It means well daemoned. It basically means you're like standing in this place where all your spirits are working with you and you're working with them, and they considered that to be the absolute highest form of human happiness, rivaled only by falling desperately in love with somebody, right? Like that to them, you couldn't be happier. And I'm telling you from my lived experience, and I bet you'll confirm it from yours, have you ever encountered anything that was more satisfying than working with that?
No, I agree. The great joy of my life, and something I always tell people is, if you love something in a pure way, there's no reason not to do it. What else could you do with your time than something you love in a pure way?
And if you're saying, I'm not going to do this thing because it's not commercially viable and I can't make any money off it and there's no market for it, you've already taken an exit off that highway that is going to lead you to, which doesn't mean, I have a whole section of my book on keeping your day job. It doesn't mean ignore the realities of the material world's demands. It just means separate those things out, right? Like, the reason I've been able to do this work for so many years, through years of no success, then this wild tsunami of huge success, then not quite so much success after that, through being scrutinized, being ignored, being criticized, losing ideas, getting ideas. I've been nonstop at this because it's not my career. It's my vocation. It's my calling. If it were my career, it would have ended after the first rejection letter back in 1991, or it would have ended after I realized I could never beat Eat, Pray, Love. I would have been like, well, I peaked, I'm done, you know? I'm not doing it for that. And it happens that I've been really lucky and blessed to have been able to have this kind of success, but I'm doing this one way or another because I'm called to do it, and because I can't think of a more interesting way to spend my time. If I could, I'd do that. And until somebody comes up with a more interesting way for me to spend my time, I'm writing.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.